Welcome to episode 7 of Unpacking Reactivity. My name's Dave.
I'm Buddy.
And we're going to be looking at putting it all together today. So just giving you a bit of a summary of the whole package, and just so we can just talk a little bit about how you essentially package it and put it all together. Our weird word for today is...
It's galah. Galah's like a little bird, pink bird. It's not a parrot, but they chew apart golf courses really well. Just pick the grass. They're very pretty little birds if you're in North America. Check it out. G-A-L-A-H.
So when Buddy says galah in the video today, please pinpoint the exact time that he says it, and the first 2 people that do that will be sent 2 of our beefy unicorn balls. All right, let's look at this entire process essentially in brief. So where do we start?
So we'll put the whole thing that we've kind of run through, and we'll pick on some parts that we have, but we'll put this all in like a big package. And I guess it's before you start your behavior mod, there's always got to be, every person that comes in for a lesson with us, a lot of times it's fix this. And again, same thing happened to me the first time I went to a trainer, really well-respected trainer, said, hey, let's fix this. He goes, dude, you gotta build the slab before we put the house up, okay? So before you start, there's quite a few things that we have to have in place.
Yeah. So I think the foundation of the dog is really, really important, and it's very much unfair to the dog to not put considerable effort into that first, because otherwise this whole thing just becomes a wrangling exercise, which is a really shitty way to train. So probably the first thing to look at is just making sure the dog is physically and mentally in a good space. And that, look, generally the dogs that we see very rarely will they fall outside of where we're happy to get them started, but certainly some dogs do need consideration and maybe a trip to the vet for a bit of an assessment first. So just checking, because there is a physical component to this, and obviously checking mental health. Now, we're not talking about, in terms of mental health, we're talking about more significant issues. We're not talking about a dog that is a little bit fearful or excitable or whatever it is, or has just a little bit of anxiety. Like, all those things fall into the realm of what this program is designed for, but we're just talking about dogs that might have something that's a little bit more significant. And typically you can identify that when you see an either extremely strong response to something, but that can also just be prey as well, or just a strong fear response in the moment, or really unpredictable behavioural outcomes. So you notice in the same scenario that the dog throws out really weird shit, and it's very hard to really identify a pattern in that. Now, the trainer that you're working with, and we're not suggesting that you do any of this on your own, we're suggesting you go locally, find someone in your area who you feel like fits into at least your understanding of what dog training should be. And please be very, very mindful that there's a lot of different methodologies, ideologies, and approaches out there. So hopefully this series gives you a little bit of a background and education, so you can actually go and ask the right questions to find the right trainer to better assist you as well. But ultimately the dog does need to be physically and mentally well.
For sure. Supplemental information, but useful information for sure. For me, the other thing, and the bedrock of where all this starts, is where the dog places value. And I think, now I'm not talking about can the dog sit and drop and anything like that. It's more, if you come into our building and you unclip the lead and you start walking around, what's your dog's first instinct? And this is the most common thing is that we'll see is the dog, we could bring him in, if I unclip the dog, dog's gone. Because there's so much of a history of reinforcing externally that's where the value for the dog is. And I joke that we become Uber drivers for the dog, that we'll clip the lead on, we'll walk them where they want to go, and then they do their thing. And for some people, if the dog doesn't have problems and they want to live that way with the dog, that's great. And I just prefer not to do that with my dogs. I prefer that if I clip my lead and I start walking around, that I've got a young puppy, that he cruises around with me. And there's a lot of handler value that I'll be able to use before I start doing any sort of obedience, detection work, or anything that I'm going to do with him.
Yeah. like the relationship part is sometimes a bit confronting for people, because if we say to you, do you have a strong relationship with your dog, and does your dog love you? Then your answer would be categorically yes. But what if somebody came into the picture tomorrow who could provide all of the things that we're talking about in terms of engagement and play and feed your dog? Would your dog's relationship shift their focus and energy to that person very quickly, especially if you have a dog already that's quite environmentally focused? Like, where is the value in that dog's life? Is it the environment or the handler? And one of the questions, and it's a stupid question to ask, but I always ask people in my workshops is, does your dog love you? Yes, of course it does. Well, does that equate in every environment? Now, what does love mean? It's a different question. It's a strange question. But how does that relationship look ultimately in different places? So we really want to make sure before we start anything in terms of this process is that you hold value to your dog in all locations, and that needs to be done when it's quiet in those places. Don't go out there when there's a bunch of dogs. Try and get your dog out into multiple locations, ideally 5 or 6 in your area, and start to build play and engagement. Make sure you've developed reward systems that the dog values extremely highly. Often in our videos, people will ask us, what food do you use? Don't worry about what food we use. It's completely irrelevant to you. I like pizza, he likes pasta. Make sure you create an extremely good diet for your dog, so a high quality diet, and then use that diet if you can to then feed and use your dog, develop your dog. But find what your dog loves. That's really important. If you want to know, quite often we use Prime 100. But we also sometimes use raw beef mince. I know that's probably too much for some of you, but depends on what the situation is with that dog and how much value we want in the reward. And ultimately, you become the reward. As you layer in the processes and do countless repetitions, the dopamine ultimately is associated with you. So you become essentially a big part of that rewarding process. But at early days, you need extremely high value reward, and we leverage off that to develop engagement in the dog.
Yeah, big time. So before, and this process for this starts even before we start to develop obedience and communication. But that is also a massive part of this as well. So once we get the dog understanding that coming out with us is a really, really good thing, then we'll start to establish some of this obedience, and I'll actually introduce like our communication, our marker system with the engagement, and then I'll tie that into my obedience. So I think a lot of times before people expect the dog to be like, whoa, the dog sits at the house, amazing, recall's great. And then we go outside and it can be front yard and the dog automatically switches out. That's because we can't do that obedience if that front end stuff isn't done, where the dog actually wants to hang out and do some stuff with us. So.
And as soon as you hear the word obedience, typically what it is referring to is communication system, sit, drop, recall, loose lead, walk. They're the activities and skills you're looking for. On top of that, you need your markers in place and reward systems to be able to utilize and to manage all of that, and some leash handling skills. But your obedience is ultimately, traditionally speaking, the dog responding to cues, not just in the home, anywhere that you go. And once again, apply this 5 or 6 environmental factor to this process. Take your dog to 5 or 6 different environments when it's quiet to start, especially if you don't get much focus at all from your dog at the moment, and then hopefully it starts to develop. If you're really struggling with this, we'll just look at going into your backyard and layering this in, and then your front yard multiple times a day. One of the best things you can do with any dog is, a lot of dogs, just as soon as you walk out that front door, explode, adrenaline, hyper arouse, give you zero focus. Just go out your front door into your front yard onto the front footpath 3 to 4 times a day for 30 seconds at a time with their favorite food, and do something fun. Go inside. Just do that multiple times a day until you walk out your front door and your dog looks at you and goes, what are we doing? Is there something happening? Can we do something together? And once you start getting that kind of handshake, then the relationship is actively shifting. And the benefit of a lot of this stuff is they're 30-second sessions. You can do them in 30 seconds a minute. If you get a couple of minutes, great. But you want to work the dog actively, and this is really important, work the dog actively with you, do something engaging and fun with you, and finish it when they want more. Don't go out and do something until they start checking out and then leave. This is just in terms of building a base level of relationship with your dog. Do it. Oh, this is fun, done. Fuck. From there, go inside, then the next time it's coming, yes, this thing's coming. You get that anticipation and excitement for the next time.
Yeah, two huge points there for me. So I was told actually by a teacher with this is called scaffolding learning, which I like that term, so I'm going to use it even if it's not called that. So we teach a dog at home, cool. Then we take it to the front yard, and then at home or our lab or whatever, we increase the criteria there, but we wait till we master it in the front yard. Then we take that and we move that somewhere. Now we're going to increase criteria in the front yard, and we just keep sort of layering these things as we go before we can get to a train station and the dog's fine. So yeah, and the other big point I love here is that people look at me. So I have 3 dogs at the moment, and people are like, "Wow, you must train dogs for 4 hours a day." Like, cause hell no, I don't train dogs for 4 hours a day because I'm not at the point. I'm not with my dogs to where we work for 40 minutes and they're dead tired, they're slogging, and now they're like, oh, this isn't even interesting anymore, and I'm going out. I capture this time we go out, we have a super really good time, different times depending on the age of the dog. Cool, all done, let's go. So I never let it get to the point where the dog's like, I'm gonna go do something else because this is boring. So yeah. we just never get to that point. So that's a big one. I think far too many people underestimate what we can do with 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, and this is where you're having all your issue in the first 1 to 3 seconds when you see the dog. So these short moments are ultimately what's going to make a big difference. The other part of this as well, early days, is making sure your muscle memory is on point. You are learning a skill set. You are learning a sport and activity, and you need to have a level of handler coordination. When the big issue comes and you're not thinking as well, you want muscle memory yourself. So that's another really important part of it. All right, moving on to some theory. So trying to better understand why your dog is exploding. So understanding the emotion that drives it is going to be significantly helpful in terms of creating the process that we're trying to develop. One of the things you can look at is the bark. High pitch bark, more of a squealy sort of a bark, an excitable bark, is very much linked to frustration and prey. So those 2 factors are generally involved with high pitch. Low pitch bark is generally a more defensive bark. So it's pretty important to understand the 2 differences in terms of what your dog is telling you in terms of that. In terms of timeframes for developing and changing emotion, for most dogs, if you have all your foundation in play and you're a very, very effective handler, well, look, in the first month, you should see considerable change, but over the course of about 6 months, you'll really build a high level of reliability, and you should be able to heavily predict outcomes in terms of this. Now, if you're building it from scratch and you need to develop your skill set and your dog has no foundation on it really in terms of this space yet, look at it as a 12-month project. It's going to be 12 months of work to really build the foundation work first and then get the dog to that point. But it probably does help to have a little bit of an understanding in terms of timeframes.
It's why as a business we don't just come in and just have a one-off private, because there's too much that we need to set up in the beginning before we even start to put the pieces in on the second and third lesson. So for us, a reason why we do 3-packs and 5-packs and 6-packs and these things is because there needs to be this guidance as we go, especially like you said in the first month, where we can get a lot done. If you come in for one lesson and we start teaching you about markers and then we don't come back and then all of a sudden, Pro Dog didn't even help me or whatever. It comes with an understanding that anytime we're trying to shift behavior, it's not going to be done in a week. Some dogs are going to be very quick, some dogs are going to be very slow, but rarely is it ever done in a week or 2 weeks.
No. And the other thing to be very conscious of as well is that these behaviours, you don't ever really fix them. So if the dog has practiced it before, the right set of circumstances, the perfect storm on the day, even if you've done all your behaviour mod, can bring it out in the dog. So really for the life of your dog, you're always hyper aware of it and you don't really let your guard down. It doesn't mean you can't relax and enjoy your dog and get all the benefits of all your training. It's just you're always making smart decisions so things don't become a problem again, because you know the work you put into building it up again. So just be a little bit conscious of that.
And we see it a lot. We see a lot of people that are like, they see the improvement and the dog's not overly social, but now we're getting a point and they go, hey, maybe we'll try the social thing again. It bites them. No pun intended. it can be a headache for the handlers when we try and step back into something that we think we've fixed.
You don't want to. We're working towards neutrality in this, not
Yep.
dogs that are going to go up on lead. We don't think. We know that on lead meet and greets are never going to be a good idea for multiple reasons, including you don't know the other handler and the dog, etc. So this is all about building a level of neutrality. And just remember as well, is on lead behaviour is completely different to off lead. So they're completely different emotions. We've got dogs in our daycare centre. If they walk past each other in reception, on a lead they might blow up and fight. In the pens, they're best mates. So it's drastically different in terms of the emotion.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to just structuring the sessions. So one of the first things that you want to consider when structuring a session is the preparation. Your preparation time will always take longer than the session time itself. Typically, we're talking about doing lots of little 2 to 3 minute bites. You want to make sure you've got your treat bag on, the right food on, the right toy, the right piece of equipment on the dog, thinking about how that session will run through. So just do a little drill in your head and then going out and doing it. So preparation is really important.
Yeah. And for me, even with dogs that I want to sort of change some emotion, and I'll actually, preparation can be like, I'll have the food prepared and maybe even in a treat bag in the fridge. So that way then I'll have my lead, I'll have everything ready to where it's not this thing of like, I open the fridge, I get the treat bag out and I put it on the table and I tell the dog, hey, it's go time. And now I spend the next 10 minutes fucking around trying to find, oh, where'd the ball go? Where's the lead? Hey, where's your collar? And now the dog's just going the entire time. I prefer to have things set up. Bang, 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 out we go. Let's get to work. And then it's not like I'm taking all of that and I can harness that into the work rather than just spill it out in the 5-10 minutes that it takes me to go find the lead.
Yeah.
So it's a small little thing, but it's I think it's kind of important to just, if we can get that emotion with the dog, let's get it, let's use it, and then off we get.
You'll be more settled and more calm, have a clearer brain. All of that's really, really important. All right, so moving on to like really what the 3 factors are that define this program. Engagement, obedience, then your leash handling skills and the equipment that's on the dog. So there's really 3 parts to that. In terms of how you go about developing your dog through a behaviour mod program, you're going to focus on the first 3 individually. You're going to learn and develop those skill sets individually first before you start to put them together. So until we've already spoken about engagement, but you really want to go work on that in isolation. Then you want to go and make sure that you have your obedience skill sets developed in isolation. Then you want to go and practice. Last episode was leash handling and equipment. Go and make sure that you're actively applying pressure correctly, that you have well fitted the right sort of equipment for your dog, and your dog has an understanding of those exercises as well. So those 3 things need to be worked on in isolation, but then ultimately it comes down to you packaging it. So an example of how you might package it. So if I was going, let's say just out the front of my house to on the footpath with my dog, and let's say Spotty's up here. Sorry,
that's okay.
Spotty
can go.
Spotty's coming down here. So what I might do in this scenario is Ken at the moment is...
Oh, you need that.
That doesn't, we'll use it without. Ken is highly likely to react in some regard to Spotty coming down. So regardless of where Ken's at this point in time, this type of angle, even if Spotty's across the road, it's quite high risk because they're working towards each other in this regard. So at this point in time, I would be getting Ken to chase a bit of food. So we go into some sort of food chasing exercise. So I would come to the side here with my leash pressure. I would pulse Ken this way, and if Ken didn't actively come on his own, and then we would be actively just working a little engagement session. So that's all we're doing. We're not using obedience in regards to this. So at this point, Spotty's coming this way, cruising through, keeps going, and we'll just basically, what we're trying to do is let Ken know when there's a dog in sight, we can do something exceptionally fun here, leveraging off reward systems. Now that's it in its base form. Now we toggle those. So this is not, we're not going to be doing food chasing and play stuff forever. It's not about that at all. So once we have a little bit of reliability in that, and we've had a few opportunities to practice that, now what we might do with Ken is, rather than going to this whole food chasing thing, Ken has a nice loose lead walk because we've developed that. So this dog comes around, all I do is say Ken's name, okay? Ken looks up at me, and I start putting Ken in a loose lead walk. So now we're going in the same direction, which takes some of that pressure off as this dog comes down here. Now I can mark and reward Ken for staying next to me. Okay, so I'm going to probably do quite a high rate of that. Every 3 steps. Yes, feed. Yes, feed. That's every 1 second. But anyway, so quite a high, you can do it every 1 second if you want. So we're not doing engagement or play, we're now reduce that to marking and rewarding. And then I might turn Ken back this way, mark and reward, mark and reward, mark and reward, mark and reward. Okay, so we're using now a system where we're relying on marking and rewarding quite heavily and reducing the intensity in what we're doing with Ken in this regard. So that would helps us sort of toggle into more a natural type session that we'll be doing as time goes on. We can toggle back to engagement if we feel like Ken is starting to blow up too much. So if Ken starts sort of looking across at Spotty again, at that time, Ken, we can use a little bit of leash pressure if we need. Boop, boop, boop. As soon as Ken starts giving us a bit of focus and attention again, we can go back into the food chasing. So you can toggle between engagement and obedience in regards to that. Now, what will happen over time is we want to reduce also the obedience that we're doing. So we're just showing you how this cycles. So Spotty's coming down this time. This is now 3 or 4 weeks in. This time we do the same thing. Ken's name. Ken comes along because Ken knows Ken's going to get lots of nice food for doing this process at this point in time. Mark and reward. Now at about 5-second intervals. Then we're going to come back this way. Okay, Spotty's going this way. And then we're just going to keep walking and go about our day and go on our walk. So we've gone from doing all of these sharp turns essentially and doing high levels of engagement, food chasing at the start, to a loose lead walk, which is more ploddy but still lots of turns, to now just Ken, come this way, another turn back this way, and then we carry on. So we fade out all of the activity, but we're carefully managing the emotion and keeping an eye on Ken's emotion the whole time.
If this is done well, the end result is you actually will get Ken walking on the street and he'll look over at Spotty and he'll be like, cool dog, and he'll check back in. So he goes on autopilot to be like, we've conditioned, hey, there's a chance I might get paid here. So it's a quick look, and I'm fine with that quick look, and then boom, and we can mark and reward that, and then we go. It's quite powerful to see as it goes. Like I've seen it work with a lot of dogs. It's very cool.
So the idea is ultimately you do nothing. So we're walking along, and we remove rewards at some point as well. So, but do you like if you know that it's always been an issue for Ken for many years or for a period of time, then why not just reward it regardless? And like Buddy said, you're going to start to get that active response of Ken looking up and wanting to engage. Just mark and reward that and keep going. So the process goes from a lot of handler activity, engagement, to toggling to obedience. So loose lead walk, marking and rewarding. If we need to, we can go back to engagement, no problem. We use leash pressure as we need to, and with the end game of just being able to cruise past and mark and reward and keep going. It's no problem. I'll give you just a simple example on this. My Raya, my dog, is she just gets offended by dogs aggressively barking at her. So she's not, and she won't do any harm. She just she'll bark at them a couple of times, just like, go away. Like that's kind of her attitude. So it's not really, there's not any, like she could approach any dog, she's fine. But she does get annoyed by, especially little dogs who are just really heavily yappy and barking at her. But there's a lot of Dachshunds in my area and a couple of Jack Russells. And if I'm walking past them, all I ever do, regardless of what's going on, is I'll say her name, Ray. When that dog's sort of coming past and around, I always give us a little bit of room. I come over about a metre, get out on the grassy bit of the footpath, and then I'll mark and just drop the ball in her mouth and just sort of tug the ball a couple of times, give her a pat and keep going. I just do that because I just don't want her ever fixating or getting more annoyed or whatever. I know it's a slight issue in there, so why not just do it? Because it costs me absolutely nothing. It's easy to do, and I could obviously do that with food as well. So it's just about creating little patterns and strategies. And in terms, as time goes on, you'll be able to be on the same side of the road. It's just about creating space. Now, of course, if you're, if you live on Elizabeth Street in the city, well, actually the footpaths are quite wide there. But if you live on a, in a busy city street and the footpaths are quite narrow, look, there are more challenges with that. But for most people who live in suburban environments, it's just about at least going up into someone's driveway a little bit or out onto the grassy bit of the footpath. I don't know what it's like back home in the US, but probably varies considerably as well. And just making sure you've got a little bit of space, and then you can work the dog actively. If you live in an apartment with your dog and you've got to be able to get past dogs in apartments, well, obviously you're going to just pick times a day and do little checks yourself to make sure you've got a bit of a clear passage and a clear way out, because it's going to be hard to do your behaviour mod in the foyer of an apartment block or etc. So yeah, is that kind of
good? Just build it in pieces, like we talked about. Just a bunch of pieces coming together. Your obedience, your environmentals, your engagement, play, your handling techniques. All these things get done individually. We put it together. That's how we can create a plan. And then you can just hang out with all the galas at the golf course.
Yeah,
no problem. They won't chase them.
That's the goal. Absolutely. All right, so
I almost forgot again. It's the hardest job I have. It's the hardest job I have.
All right, so the people who've been watching this know to just come to the last 3 minutes.
They're going to pick on the end of the video now. Damn it.
All right, so what we're going to do for episode 8. This is an 8-part series. We're going to do a Q&A. So on Facebook, at a point in time in probably the next couple of weeks, once we've released episode 7, I'm going to be putting a post up asking for questions. I will make sure it's very, very visible, and then please post your questions in that, and we're going to pick probably about 8 to 10 questions out of that we think that relate to most of you, and then we're going to run through those in our final episode. So keep an eye out for that. That'll be coming up. And we'll notify you on different platforms that's happening as well, so you can keep an eye on Facebook. But we hope that gives you a little bit of a pretty broad picture of how you can start working through this, and certainly helps educate you if you're in an area a long way from us and you want to get some help in your area. There's some key questions and things you can take from this. We're not suggesting our approach and methodology is the best in the world. It's just an approach that we've used for thousands of dogs, and we've had a great deal of success with that, so we just want to share that with you.
Sounds good. We'll see you guys soon.
All right. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.